Good evening, folks. Thank you so much for joining our town hall with Michelle Siri. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Jared Shabline. I'm the chair of the Lower Shore Progressive Caucus, and I have just a few quick updates for you before we get started. Number one, throughout the evening, we are going to be doing a giveaway for a free ticket to the Mail-In Gala. So make sure you type the hashtag in the chat to be entered to win. Number two, on May 28th, Saturday, May 28th, from 1:30 to 3:30, we are going to be having a Get Out the Vote rally with our endorsed candidates, John King, Michelle Siri, Heather Mazier, and other candidates at the Hawk Corner in Somerset County in Princess Anne. With that, I want to go ahead and turn it over to my dear friend and colleague, Wendy Dennis, who is our communications chair.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our town hall. And a little bit about tonight's guest is Michelle Siri. She is running for lieutenant governor as running mate with John King. Michelle Siri is a first-generation Iranian American. She has spent her career in public service fighting for women's rights, because she knows that we can't take those rights for granted. She is the executive director of the Women's Law Center of Maryland, a nonprofit that fights for the physical safety, economic security, and bodily autonomy of women through legal representation and legislative advocacy. In this role, Michelle has advocated for transformational policy ideas like paid family leave, equal pay for equal work, safety for victims of domestic violence, and bodily autonomy for Maryland women. She previously served as an assistant Maryland attorney general and the board president of Planned Parenthood of Maryland, but began her career as a practicing attorney. Her first job was at a private law firm, but she was pregnant with her oldest son, and her career was sidelined and put on the back burner. This experience has helped push her towards a career in public service because she knows that this is a similar challenge for a lot of Maryland families. Michelle lives in Caucusville with her husband and two sons. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Michelle Siri with us tonight.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm a little jealous of Jared. The birds really just added to the effect, quite frankly.
Yeah, it's a great night to be outside, but here we are.
This is a perfect place to be. If I couldn't be there, this is the best place to be.
That's great. That's great. Okay, well, at this point, we would like to play our first clip that shows the campaign announcement with you and Mr. John King.
Michelle, you've spent your whole life fighting to make Maryland a more equitable place. I couldn't be more grateful to you for taking this next step of entering public life to join me as my running mate.
I'm so excited to enter this chapter with you, John. From my time as board chair of Planned Parenthood of Maryland till now as the executive director of the Women's Law Center of Maryland, I've really tried to be a champion for issues like equal pay for equal work, paid family leave, and bodily autonomy for women in Maryland. I've been advocating for women's rights my whole career, and I know that we can't take it for granted here, and that's why I've been doing the work that I do to make sure no woman is left behind.
Your dedication to public service made it clear that you share my belief in the transformative power of government to be a force for good in people's lives. And that makes you the perfect partner to join us in this movement to build a more equitable future for Maryland.
I'm so excited and so honored to partner with you as your lieutenant governor.
Thrilled to have you on the team. Now let's get to work.
Wonderful. So one of the reasons, or some of the many reasons, that Lower Shore Progressive Caucus has endorsed the John King and Michelle Siri campaign for governor and lieutenant governor of Maryland are for just the things that were in that clip. That government can be a positive force for good in the lives of Marylanders. And we are happy and pleased and thankful that you two are striving for this. And it couldn't be more of the moment right now that with your experience with Planned Parenthood and your advocacy for women, I think that those things are going to be I think most people would agree that those things are going to be of great importance going forward. So your moment is now, I'm afraid to say. So I are you ready for the challenge?
Absolutely. This has been, unfortunately, not a big surprise what's been happening in our country. And it's something that I've been long saying we can't take for granted. So, here we are. And I think it's a reckoning for a lot of folks that thought we were always in a safe place, in a safe state. But we need to make sure that we are all rallying right now for not just for women's rights, but for Black and Brown communities and immigrant rights and LGBTQ communities. Those are all at risk right now. And so it's really important that we're all working together on that. And I just want to say I'm so grateful, really, for the endorsement. It means a lot to both me and John.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead with the first 4 of our questions for tonight that we've prepared to give our audience a little bit of a chance to get to know you better. So here we go. Question number 1. For some of our audience may not know, what position are you running for, even though I have said, and what does that role do? What will you be doing as Lieutenant Governor? Oops, I just gave it away.
Well, that's it. So I'm running for Lieutenant Governor of Maryland with John King's gubernatorial campaign. Although I will say, my children, I have teenage boys, 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, and they say, Mom, no one knows what Lieutenant Governor is. That sounds like it's the military. So they call it Vice Governor. And that's an easy thing to remember, right? And that's essentially what the role is. It is a partner to the governor that can, represent the governor's office, can partner with them, can be an advisor. And that's really what John brought me in to be. And that's why I was so attracted to working with John, because it's this opportunity to really partner together and be equals when it comes to what we bring to the table. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Excellent. Petition to change it to Vice Governor, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, if you can expand a little bit on how exactly you began your career in advocacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched a little bit on it really in my bio. I grew up straddling 2 different worlds. My father is the son of a coal miner. He's from Ohio. He's a proud Army veteran. But my mother was born and raised on the other side of the world in Iran. And that's actually where my parents met, where they married, had my brother, only coming back to the States for my dad to go to college on the GI Bill. And that's when I was born. But when I was 2 months old, my dad graduated and we packed everything up and moved back across the ocean to Iran, intending to put down permanent roots. And unfortunately, in the wake of the Iranian Revolution, it wasn't safe for my family to stay. And so we had to flee. But I'm so grateful that we were able to rebuild our lives and our home here in America. Because once we came to the States, my mom was able to realize opportunities that she'd never had and went on to become a small business owner. And so it was really my mom who taught me early on that, this radical notion that my value isn't limited by my gender. And I grew up so keenly aware of how fragile my rights were, not just in Iran, frankly, but in the States as well. And so for me, this fight for women's rights and equality has always really been as fundamental as breathing. And that's really been the foundation of so much of my work. Just like you said, knowing we can never take it for granted. If you fast forward to the 2000s, as you mentioned, I was a young associate at a law firm. I was on an accelerated partnership track, and I had my first son, Braden. And when I was lucky, I was one of the really lucky ones. I had paid family leave. But when I got back from that leave, I was denied a bonus. I was taken off a partnership track, and I was really sidelined in all of these opportunities that should have been afforded to me. And essentially, my bosses wanted me to feel that I couldn't have, that career and the family at the same time. So those are the things and the experiences that I've kept with me when I'm advocating for any kind of women's and family issues, because I know that those kind of experiences are happening across the state, but happening really the most to those who can afford it the least. So that's what led me to my first being involved with Planned Parenthood of Maryland. And then that showed me just how much impact advocates can have. And that's what led me to take on the Women's Law Center of Maryland.
Excellent. Yes. And I think your story is becoming more and more shared by all, and people are speaking up that they've had that similar experience. Yeah. So, one of your more significant role was your advocacy with Planned Parenthood. What would you say was your biggest accomplishment from that time at Planned Parenthood?
Yeah, so we're really lucky here in Maryland that we've had traditionally a legislature that has been staunchly supportive of abortion rights. And so as advocates, our role was often to be as proactive as possible to make sure that Maryland was leading the way when it came to reproductive health. And so in 2016, I'm really proud to say that Planned Parenthood was instrumental when I was board president of passing what's called the Contraceptive Equity Act. And that bill was the most comprehensive legislation in the country, maybe even still today, when it came to removing barriers to accessing contraception. It removed the copays for most types of birth control. It allows women to obtain birth control for 6 months at a time, right? Instead of having to go to their doctor every month to get a new prescription, or to go to their pharmacist every month to pick up a new prescription, they could get 6 months at a time. It was transformational when it came to equity in contraception, being one of the first, or actually probably the first in the country, to make sure that we expanded coverage for vasectomies so that the male partners in relationships could have a role in contraception. And it went even further, and it made sure to include coverage for emergency contraception like Plan B. So what we really did with that bill was remove all of the barriers, such as transportation, such as the ability to get to a doctor or a specialist, the ability to take time off, to find childcare, removed as many of those as possible so that people could be in charge of their bodies, because we know that contraception is so important for bodily autonomy, for our safety, for our economic security. And so it's really been a crucial piece of legislation that I was very proud to be a part of.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes, it is all those little things like, having the time off and, running the errands. Yes, you're absolutely right.
Take for granted. Yeah. And depending if you live in a rural community, it's really not easy sometimes to get to the pharmacist. If you live in the city and you got to take the bus, that's really hard too. So there's all sorts of barriers that I think folks can take for granted sometimes.
Yeah. If you don't think about it. Yeah. That is true. That is true. We enjoyed the live discussion between yourself and Mr. John King following the leaked Roe v. Wade. It's not a decision yet.
The draft opinion.
Draft opinion, yes. Thank you. We have a clip of you discussing the trigger laws from that live discussion. We're going to show that now.
Now more than ever. And if one thing is going to show folks that elections matter, this is how our Supreme Court got stacked. I mean, it was a litmus test, whether people say it or not, about whether or not they were going to support Roe v. Wade or if they were working to overturn it. And we knew that the justices that were appointed in the past administration, that they were going straight for these rights. So now more than ever, we need to be making our voices heard. We need to be getting to the protests. We need to be calling on our state legislators to not put in trigger laws, because that's what this opinion ultimately does. It says that, well, it says one thing that I agree with, which is that that these decisions should not be made by, a small few number, which I agree. It shouldn't be made by politicians. It shouldn't be made by courts. But then they go and say it should be made by the states themselves. And I say, no, it should be made by the doctors and the women. That's who should be making these decisions. But this decision is going to send it right back to the states. And so we really need to put pressure on those states that have the trigger laws in place, or there's a number of them. There's about 4 or 5 right now, including Montana, that are in the process, and we need to stop that. And so those protests are really important right now.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So, I think a lot of us have been bombarded with news and talking about trigger laws. We've been hearing, quite a bit about that on the news, but it's possible that there are a few people who have joined us tonight who maybe don't know about trigger laws and what exactly is at risk if Roe v. Wade is appealed and what will happen. So could you kind of give us a broad overview of those things, of what the trigger laws would do and, what that risk we're facing probably inevitably in June.
Absolutely, Wendy. Thank you. So, right. So the draft opinion that's been leaked is from a case called Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health. And essentially it's the first case in 50 years that's really looking at pre-viability abortions since Roe v. Wade. And so it essentially overturns Roe v. Wade and says we're sending it back to the states. And what that means is if this opinion is formalized, then we have probably about 26 states that overnight will essentially be, abortion will be essentially outlawed. And in 13 of those states right now, they have something called a trigger law on the books. And what a trigger law is just what it sounds like. It's written in a way so that if Roe v. Wade is overturned, it triggers an outlaw on abortion, a ban on abortion. So there's 13 states that are just waiting, and they've just had them there waiting on the books because they knew that the constitutional right to an abortion existed. So they said, well, we're just going to wait it out because this was always the plan. So those 13 laws are out there. Then on top of that, there's another 13 states that either have laws that are so restrictive, and I'm talking they have a ban on abortions past 6 weeks, or a ban on abortions past a heartbeat, which is usually around 7 weeks, 8 weeks at the most, which is essentially before most women know they're pregnant. And so even though they say, no, we haven't outlawed abortion all the way, we've just outlawed them past this period of time, it is essentially a ban. And then there's a handful of states making up the last part of that 13 that are in the works, that are trying to get an outright ban on abortion or some similar restriction on abortion rights. So that's what our landscape is going to be, 26 states where there is no abortion. And I have to just say right now, even in Maryland, which is, again, very, progressive when it comes to abortion rights, 2/3 of our counties don't have abortion providers. And so this has been a problem in Maryland. And, it's a challenge for so many folks to get to their abortion, to get to an abortion provider when they need one. And so this past session, I'm very proud to have supported the Abortion Care Access Act, which expands the scope of who can provide abortions in Maryland. Currently, 14 other states already allow nurse practitioners, nurse midwives, certified physician's assistants to perform abortion care. They can already manage a miscarriage, but they can't do the actual abortion. And so even though the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists say this is within their scope of practice. So this piece of legislation is really important to expand who can provide that kind of care, because we have a huge shortage, which is not a surprise given the attacks on providers, the attacks on their safety, the harassment that's involved. So we have this huge shortage, and that legislation is going to help. And the next administration is really going to be poised to administer that and implement that legislation, because we've asked, there's funding in there to train those providers. The legislation says by 2023, it has to be provided. We've asked Governor Hogan to release those funds early. It's a little over $3.5 million. He has refused. He also vetoed that legislation, and we had to override it. So the next administration, so John and I, would be committed to making sure that we are implementing that swiftly, efficiently, and safely, so that women aren't facing the types of barriers that we're already seeing right now.
Thank you for laying that out. I think sometimes people, kind of don't understand, just sort of the play by play. So thank you for explaining all that. And I think that helps people understand why it is so important that you and John do get elected at the end of this year. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We have talked a little bit about women's advocacy, but another big issue here that is especially pertinent, particularly with some of the weather we've had this week down here in Ocean City. How do we in Maryland build on the Climate Solution Act to address climate change?
Yes. So, there's an old adage that I really love that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. And then the second best time to plant a tree is today. And the point of that is just to highlight how important it is that we act now on climate change. You just mentioned, the insane weather, the extreme weather that we've been experiencing. We've seen the devastating impact and effects of climate change, from flooding in Ellicott City, in Annapolis and Baltimore, to the farmers on the Eastern Shore who have lost their farmland already due to saltwater intrusion. Right? We've seen that now, and we need to act now. And so the Climate Solutions Act was a fantastic first step, but we really believe that it has to be the floor and not the ceiling. It was important that it got passed right now. We needed to lay that foundation, but it's kind of vague, and it's going to be up to the next administration again to implement it and to make sure that we take it even further. And so, for example, there's parts in the Climate Solution Act that talks generally about going, greenhouse emissions and public buildings and things like that. But we've been very clear that we want all public buildings, including K through 12 schools, colleges and universities, to be carbon free by 2030. It talks about the public fleet, but just generally and about how it needs to go green. We've been very specific that we want the entire public fleet, including all public transportation and all of our public school buses, to be 100% zero emissions again by 2030. We've also set a goal of 60% of our cars sold in Maryland should be electric by that time. And we have a plan to build 10,000 charging stations to make sure that we're supporting those electric vehicles. And then finally, we're really committed to making sure that we only use clean, renewable energy. So we need to get rid of things like incinerators that are just causing pollution and are not really helping our climate solutions.
Absolutely. Ooh, sounds good. All those charging stations, right?
Yes.
How can we protect the Eastern Shore specifically from climate change?
Sure. What's good for the Eastern Shore is good for all of Maryland. I mean, the Chesapeake is a jewel of our state. We just saw how beautiful it is. It not only attracts folks from around the country to come to Maryland, but it's really essential to our economy and to our environmental health. And so we want to make sure that we're upholding our commitment to the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement with our neighboring states. Unfortunately, under the Hogan administration, it's really fallen in priority. So we need to recommit to that. And John and I will absolutely do that. We also want to make sure that we are fully staffing our regulatory agencies like our Department of Environment, Department of Natural Resources. These are the agencies that are tasked with administering and regulating pollution and polluters. And they are so woefully understaffed right now. They don't have enough folks to do any of the work, let alone to increase the ambitious plans that we have. And so we want to make sure that we rebuild our state government and the infrastructure that we need to make sure that we're protecting our environment. We also want to make sure that we are preventing pollution from poultry farms, which I know is a big issue on the Eastern Shore, and it wreaks havoc on the environment without you seeing really any of the benefits of those businesses. And then finally, of course, we need to make sure that we are protecting our, precious natural resources of the Bay, preventing overfishing, overharvesting. There were regulations in place under Governor O'Malley that Governor Hogan withdrew, and we need to get back to those.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well, the final question for this portion before we move on to the questions from our audience is, again, still sticking with the climate issues and the green energy, but how do you envision the Eastern Shore as a leader in the green energy future? How can we ensure good paying jobs in that sector are brought here?
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many opportunities in manufacturing and development and tech when it comes to the green economy. And it's going to be really basic. It's going to be relying on solar, on wind and thermal energy. And there are lots of opportunities for the Eastern Shore to be involved in that. And really constructing that green economy, it's going to create tens of thousands of good paying jobs. It's going to build wealth for Marylanders in every corner of our state, especially the Eastern Shore. And we want to be partners with those communities. And we think it's really important when we talk about the environment that we are partnering with those impacted communities and not just leaving them out of the discussions. And so we want to make sure we do that.
Excellent. Excellent. Do you have any other comments that you would like to make? Any something else that you'd like to bring up that maybe we haven't covered in their questions so far this evening?
I did want to, if I could talk a little bit more, getting back to the Roe v. Wade, just because there was something I didn't really get a chance to talk about, and Absolutely. That is, what do we think the main impacts are, and what can we do right now? And so I want to be mindful of time, but I did really want to just let folks know really what we're seeing in Maryland play out right now. And so the first is really an influx of people coming and seeking abortions from out of state. We've already seen people from Texas. We've seen people from the deep South coming to Maryland, and we're poised actually to maybe even be one of the most southern states. And when we have that happening, we see wait times increasing. We see the risks of pregnancy because it's later in gestational time, and we see expenses increasing. And that's why it's so important to implement, again, the Abortion Care Access Act. The second thing is, that's just for the folks who can afford to travel to Maryland. For the folks who can't, we're going to see an increase of people self-managing abortions. And that's typically going to come in the form of what's called a medicated abortion, an abortion pill, right? And so that increases risk because it's dangerous. If they don't know what they're actually getting, if they're ordering something blindly online, they don't know how far along they are. And then there's also a risk of prosecution. Lots of states are modeling now after Texas's SB 8, and they're building up cases where they can prosecute women. And we've seen women not only be prosecuted for self-managing abortion, but for helping others get an abortion or even for miscarrying. And so we want to make sure that we have protections in place in Maryland so that we're not allowing women to be prosecuted in those situations, and that we're protecting providers who are providing what would be a legal abortion in Maryland so that their licenses aren't revoked. And then finally, I just want to really make it really clear to people that if women aren't able to travel, if they're unable to self-manage, then they're going to become victims of forced birth. And we need to be prepared to provide them all the supports that they will need. And ultimately, that's why it's so important that we pass a constitutional amendment here in Maryland. And I testified on that bill this year. I was one of the lead advocates working with Speaker of the House, Adrian Jones. It passed the House. It did not pass the Senate, but I can guarantee that we will be back next year. And as an administration, we will make sure we have the full force of the governor's office pushing the legislature to pass that, because it is our best chance to enshrine not only abortion rights, but all of the collateral issues, again, which is, contraception, reproductive technology for artificial technology like IVF. My boys are IVF babies, the LGBTQ and trans communities. We need something that is going to enshrine and protect those rights for generations to come. And that's that constitutional amendment.
Excellent. Thank you. And, especially enjoyed your Twitter thread that you put out there. And, you did mention the importance of codifying, the contraception and the protection of the LGBTQ rights, because abortion is targeting abortion is just the beginning, as you said. It's not the end game, as you pointed out.
The board of Planned Parenthood of Maryland, I remember the CEO sitting me down, and this was 15 years ago at least, sitting me down and saying, Michelle, it's not really about abortion. That's just the gateway. And he says, contraception is next. And then it's just all downhill.
Yep. And on the national level, we've already heard that. So, so kind of scary. Well, I am going to step back and I'm going to turn it over to my co-host for this evening, Demetria. Demetria, if you would like to join in, thank you. Thank you again for answering all of our questions. And we are going to start taking questions from the audience. So Demetria, take it away.
Hello.
Hi there.
So I do have some questions. I'm Demetria, and it is an honor to meet you. And I'm really, really excited that you're even in the running, that you stepped up to the plate. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure.
So my questions are, what is your take about marijuana legalization?
Yeah, so John and I are 100% supportive of legalizing cannabis, but we think that the most important piece of that is to make sure that we are doing it in an equitable way. And that's really, there's two parts of that even. So one is making sure that we have the full force of the governor's administration and working with the judiciary to get expungements done, because we don't want to see people who have, basically through the systemic racism of the justice system, who are going to be penalized for their past criminal behavior that is no longer criminalized. And then the second part of that is making sure that the licensing and regulation is done in an equitable way. And so that especially minority communities and minority business owners are at the table when it comes to building out the business opportunities when it comes to cannabis. We think that's incredibly important.
And thank you. And my second question is, what is your take about the housing crisis here in Maryland and on the Eastern Shore?
Yes, I hear about that from folks all over the place. And it's when we talk about affordable housing, people seem to think, that we're only talking about like super low income folks who are on government subsidies. And it's not, it is across the board. It is affordable housing for working Marylanders who just can't access it. But again, it's all about equity for us. We want to make sure we have enough low-income housing. We want to make sure we have enough mixed-use development, particularly around transportation hubs. And we want to invest in our housing trust fund. So in DC, District of Columbia, they have a housing trust fund just like Maryland does. And they spend more, I believe, in 1 year on their housing trust fund than Maryland has since the 1990s. So it's a matter of political will to make sure that we can do this. We can have more affordable housing. We just need the political will behind it. And John and I will stand behind that and make sure we make it happen.
Do you and John have plans for that in your, do you have plans for that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. If you go to if you go to johnkingforgovernor.com, we have our housing platform is on there. We've got a lot of policy on there. So if you are a policy wonk, you will love it. You can go and you can find it all in there, but we do have more things laid out about our housing policy. And quick plug, we will be back with you all at the end of this month in just a couple of weeks. And so John will be there in person and we'll have more chance to talk in depth about all of these issues.
Okay. You did go over a little about the energy crisis that's going on. Could you give us like an example of what is in your plan concerning green energy and universal health care?
Sure. Like I said, when it comes to green energy, we really have, I think, the most ambitious and broad plan out there. And it is to make sure that we are, zero greenhouse emissions by 2030. It means that we are an electric fleet by 2030, full public fleet, everything from school buses to public buses and police cars and everything in between. And also that means all of our state buildings.
Right.
It's the focus on electric cars. And when it comes to universal health care, so John testified actually in favor of Delegate Ruth and Senator Pinsky. They had legislation this year. John testified in favor of it. The Women's Law Center, we supported it as well. We fundamentally believe that healthcare is a human right. And so, as an administration, we will do everything in our power to try and influence the federal government to get to single payer. We completely support the commission to study it. But at the same time, at the state level, we know that there are things that we can be doing. So as an administration, we really want to make sure we're closing gaps in healthcare coverage, especially when it comes to foreign-born populations, when it comes to the LGBTQ community. And as we just discussed, reproductive health as well. Abortion is healthcare, and healthcare is a human right. So we are 100% in favor of that.
Right. Okay. Women make 85 cents to every dollar a man makes.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell me why you think it's like a struggle in the workplace for equality?
Yeah, and so in Maryland we're averaging around 85 cents for women, but really for African American women it's 69 cents, and for Latinas it's 47 cents. We are seventh from the bottom in the nation when it comes to our Latina sisters and what they're making, and we are also almost at the bottom when it comes to working mothers. So there's a separate pay gap just for penalty that you get for being a working mom, and so we are way at the bottom. And there are a number of things really that play into that. One is salary history. And I'm really proud of the fact that I think it was in 2019, the pandemic makes it hard to keep track a little right now, but in 2019, we passed the comprehensive legislation called the Salary History Bill that prevents employers from relying on someone's salary history when setting a new salary. And the reason that's so important is, if you can imagine, if you are a woman coming into a workforce and you've been discriminated by your prior employers, mm-hmm. and so your salary is depressed, you're just generally a victim of the gender wage gap, so your salary is depressed. Maybe you took time off to care for children, so your salary is a few years behind, so your salary is depressed. Setting that new salary, that employer is completely, doesn't mean to be discriminating, but that's going to be the result. So we passed that legislation. We're waiting to see how it's been implemented. It's only been about a year or so. We don't even have any data yet, but we're working on that. But there are other reasons for the gender pay gap to persist in addition to that. And one of them is called occupational segregation. And so what that means is in women-dominant industries, they're going to earn less as a whole, even the men in those industries. So think of teaching, nursing, hospitality. They're going to earn less than male-dominated industries like construction. So a woman in construction is probably going to earn more. So that's occupational segregation. And then there's segregation within the sectors too. So if you think about teachers, it's typical to see women in K through, in elementary. But once you get the older and older you get, where you get more salary, you're going to see more and more men. And then finally, I'm going to say that there's, a lot of our cultural mores. So there's studies out there that show that women are penalized for negotiating on their salaries. There was a Harvard Business Review study that showed that if a woman tried to negotiate, she ends up earning or being offered something like 0.9, and I don't remember the exact percentages, but around 0.9% less than if she hadn't tried to negotiate.
Wow.
Whereas men who negotiate end up getting over 1% more than what they would have been offered otherwise.
Wow.
So, right. So that's where we are. We need to normalize those behaviors. We need to normalize women negotiating, and we need to remove as much of those issues from the negotiation process and the salary process. I strongly believe that salaries need to be dependent on the position. And as an administration, there are things that we can do. President Obama had a very strict, no salary history policy in place. He made sure that that they did audits of the federal government salary histories or salaries and gender audits. And as an administration, we can do the same, and we will do the same.
So how can we address the wage gap, and what can we do for the communities that's struggling due to the wage gap that's in our community?
Yeah, so like I said, gender wage audits are really important, and at the government level, and then it's also using the full force and influence of the state, really, when we're negotiating with businesses, when we're doing contracts, when we're what businesses we're supporting, to make sure that they are treating their clients, or their employees rather, equitably, and that they are supporting equal pay for equal work. I think those are really important things that the administration can and should do. I think, the pandemic really shed light on so many of the issues that we've known about for years. And again, like I was saying, African-American women make 69 cents on the dollar and Latinas make 47. Well, those communities also disproportionately make up the communities that were hardest hit during the pandemic. So that's hospitality, it's restaurant servers, it is caregivers. Those are the communities, those are the sectors that have been hardest hit. And that's why we see so many women out of the workforce right now. And so we need to make sure that we are providing support. We're providing base salaries for teachers, for making sure that we're using the power of the state to support caregivers, and making sure that we have universal childcare so that we can get those women back into the workforce.
I like that. What are your ideas about combating sexism in our community?
Yeah. Our whole campaign, I'd like to think, is really based upon equity. John and I are working so hard to bring both a racial justice and a gender justice lens to everything we do. I mean, that's our careers have been built on that. We know how the two are intersected. And so that means that when we look at climate change, we need to look at the disparate impact on Black and brown communities, for example. We know that there were kids today that probably missed school due to asthma because of incinerators in their neighborhoods. So we want to make sure that we are bringing that kind of lens to the environmental issues. We want to make sure that when we're looking at economic development, that we take into consideration all of those things that the gender pay gap impacts on women's earning potentials, everything from motherhood to the amount of retirement savings that they're going to have and everything in between there. And then it means that we need to be really intentional about our appointments, about leadership, not just setting an example from the top down, but also, again, using that purchasing power of the state to make sure that the entities that want to do business with the state are adhering to those same principles. And then finally, it means, like I said earlier, recognizing that when we say healthcare is a human right, that we're remembering that reproductive care, including abortion, is also healthcare. And I think that is such an important part of women's economic security, is being able to obtain that kind of contraception and reproductive health care and abortion care that they need.
Right. We have another clip from you live discussing with John King, and you guys are discussing about the pathway to abortion. We're going to the pathway to abortion right. Y'all, please forgive me. I get so nervous. I get so nervous. So we're gonna finish discussing that, and we're gonna show this clip about the pathway to abortion right with you and John King, which I really find enlightening. So here you go.
But we can't take for granted that our legislative body won't change in some way, right? You know, statutes are very easy to overturn. We can repeal a law within the legislative session, you know, within 90 days. But if we have a constitutional amendment enshrining the right to reproductive rights, it not only is the greatest protection that we can have to ensure for generations to come, but it also sets the groundwork for other reproductive rights, other affiliated reproductive rights. And it also, I think, sends a really strong message about what is a priority here in our state. I think women's bodily autonomy needs to be a priority.
Wow. So what is the current commission, and how would the John King and Michelle Siri campaign implement it?
So the current commission was established in 2016, and it was tasked with developing a plan to make Maryland schools, you know, once again, the best in the nation. And so in 2020, with a lot of help from advocates like yourselves, and with John King, you know, being an instrumental part of that, the plan, the Maryland legislature took the recommendations of the Kirwan Commission and passed what's called the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. So that is this comprehensive legislation that's planned to help support schools, teachers, and students. And like the Climate Solutions Act, the blueprint is really the floor, not the ceiling, right? We need to make sure there are all sorts of things that were kept out of there. We need to make sure that we include paraprofessionals. They were left out of the blueprint. We need to make sure that we are starting our teachers off at $60,000 salaries, because we are having such a shortage right now of teachers. And we know that that's not going to fix everything, but it's going to help. We need to make sure that we are keeping class size on the table, so that teachers can negotiate and work on keeping class sizes smaller, because we know that that's a huge issue for so many teachers. And so we really want to make sure that we are supporting both the teachers and the students when it comes to the blueprint. There are so many opportunities there that the next administration is going to be tasked with. It's going to be funding it, which I should say, you know, I'm very proud of the fact that we have not shied away from talking about that component of the blueprint. I don't think a lot of other campaigns have done so. They've been pretty vague about it, but we are pretty open that when it comes to funding the blueprint, you know, there's some funding already built in there, but we really want to make sure that we are reforming our tax process right now, and that we have some real fundamental tax reform going on, because people need to be paying their fair share in this state. We know that there are millionaires out there that are not paying the taxes that they should. And so we want to make sure that we have a tax on folks earning over $1 million. We want to make sure that we are closing gaps in our corporate tax laws, closing those loopholes. So combined reporting. So many corporations in the state aren't even paying taxes in our state. We want to make sure that there's a country club exception, which I think is insane that they get an exemption from paying taxes. So we want to make sure that folks are paying their fair share. And when we do that, we're going to be able to pay and invest in things like our education system, which really needs to be the foundation of our society.
That is great. Could you explain to us how would that benefit the Marylanders?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, you know, education is the foundation, not just of our communities, really, but our democracy, right? If we have a well-educated society, we're going to be able to have, you know, higher level public discourse and not be breaking everything down into fighting and yelling. And by investing in our education system now, we're establishing those building blocks of public health, public safety, a more prosperous state. You know, if anyone understands the power of teachers, it's John. Right. So, you know, if you know his story, his parents both passed away when he was very young, and it was teachers who saved his life. They literally, you know, like any other young child that is in any of our schools experiencing trauma, especially for John, a young Afro-Latino boy, he was experiencing trauma, he was acting out, and they could have given up on him, but instead teachers found him and gave him another opportunity and another chance. And so that is really what our whole campaign is based on. It's finding schools and government as a force for good in people's lives. And education is such a key component to that.
I really enjoyed you, and I enjoy asking you questions. We're going to turn it over to Jared. We're going to turn it over to Jared.
Well, thank you, Demetria. I really enjoyed getting to know you, and I can't wait to meet you in person. Wendy, you're muted. I'm not sure if I'm muted anymore.
Yes, it was me. I had a reverb thing, so I was muting. Okay. So actually Jared is in Pocomoka, as you know, with a couple of folks who are going to endorse. Sorry, we're having a little bit of a technical issue here. I am looking to see. Hold on one second. Hey, Tyler, can we live stream from a different phone? Or are they not going to be joining us? Jared's phone died. I will just explain. So the endorsements were supposed to be coming. Okay, they're here. Okay, so I think we have Jay Satterfield first, and Michelle and Amber. So I think it's going to be Jay Satterfield first, who is going to be providing an endorsement.
Hey, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, great. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Please forgive me. I'm still in the vehicle. I've been traveling all day and back and forth. But, I really wanted to express my excitement in endorsing the King Siri campaign, for a number of reasons. I have worked within the local, state, and federal levels of political campaigns. I now work for the U.S. government as a federal grants coordinator. And I from all my years in work, I've seen what it takes to be a well-rounded candidate, but also someone who's not just a candidate at some point, but can get the job done at the end of the day. And everything that this campaign exemplifies shows me that. I actually started my work in Maryland politics before I started working for the government here a couple of months ago as a campaign manager for another gubernatorial candidate. One of the reasons I left that campaign was because clearly that candidate showed me that he could get the job done or was willing to on the Democratic side, but really it was for my admiration of John to start, and now you, Michelle, as his partner for the lieutenant governor seat. I got to say that you guys have really shown us, especially here on the lower shore, that you're not only willing to talk about showing up, but you show up. Not many candidates do that. This area has been neglected for a number of years when it comes to folks really showing up and being present. I know you guys are down here in a couple of weeks, and then shortly after that again for one of the debates. And Maryland's a pretty wide state. There's a lot of ground to cover, and I feel like you guys do that. I see you doing that all the time, and that speaks volumes. You're also a campaign that has promised down ballot resources for our state and local candidates. And, I've had the opportunity to speak to every Democratic candidate, whether it be some that have dropped out since or current, but every candidate is declared for the Democratic ticket. And you guys seem to be the only campaign that is willing to not only give those resources, but be a part of that process too, down ballot. And again, that speaks volumes, especially here on the lower shore where folks have just felt left out for a number of years. When it comes to your policy plans, look, I do enjoy policy. That's something that I've been involved in writing and taking a part of for a number of years. From your healthcare policy to your education policy, affordable housing and transportation, I've yet to see another candidate candidate, lieutenant governor candidate, provide a platform that truly is equitable to all. So I don't know how much time I have here to speak, but I'm going to leave it to that. And I just want to say I'm so happy and proud to endorse the King Siri campaign, and can't wait to see what good things you bring to the state.
Jay, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your words, all of your hard work, and I can't wait to meet you in person in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Satterfield. So that was wonderful. So I think we still have a couple more people, just proving that the Lower Shore Progressive Caucus is all over the place. I think Michelle and/or Amber, they're ready to go. They're also in Pocomoke, I believe, or Salisbury. Who's next?
Hey guys.
Michelle!
Hi, I am so excited to be here. So I am, if you cannot tell, I am in beautiful Pocomoke City right now at Dockside. I'm out here supporting my friend Todd Knock, who is running for delegate, also an LSPC endorsed candidate, part of Team 38. I am so excited. I can't wait to get to work with all of you guys. And that's what I want to talk about here. Being able to work with our governor and lieutenant governor at the state level is so incredibly crucial. There are so many things that have been neglected over the past 8 years, and we really cannot wait to get to work with you guys. It is something that we have been working towards since we founded, since the very first meeting of the LSPC. Those of us who have been here the whole time remember that, and what an uphill battle it felt at the time, and having partners at the state level is incredibly crucial to getting the rest of our work done. We've been working towards this for the last 4 or 5 years, and being able to have partners all along the ballot, whether it is from municipal to county to delegate or state senate or in the governor's seat. We are incredibly excited to be able to work with John and you, Michelle, which great name, I have to say. And you spell it the right way, I believe. So that is an added bonus. Thank you very much. Michelle with 1 L's represent.
No, I'm 2 L's. I'm 2 L's.
Oh, are you 2 L's? Oh, dang. Okay. Well, I won't hold it against you. All right. That's fine.
We can keep each other.
That's okay. That's okay. We'll cover all the bases. There you go. But having people to work with at the state level who understand the struggles, who show up here, like Jay said, we have gone so long without a gubernatorial candidate who shows up here, and not just once or twice, but consistently, regularly, and talks and communicates with the people on the ground, the organizers on the ground, who are here day in and day out, and they understand the struggles that we're facing down here, whether it is clean water or expanding broadband or abortion rights, and the lack of the health care down here that's available to women and all people down here, whether you're disabled or whatever. Having that understanding and being able to work with someone at that level who understands these issues is incredibly invaluable to us. And that is why I so greatly appreciate both of you, both you and John, for showing up consistently and having these concerns in the forefront of your mind at all times when it comes to creating policy or even just reaching out to voters and people who live in these communities in rural Maryland. It is so rare to have people who show up in rural Maryland, and that is just something that you guys have consistently done. And that's why I'm endorsing you. That is why I'm working with you, and I can't wait to see you guys down here again.
Oh, Michelle, thank you so much. I think it was maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago that I met you on one of my trips out there in the library. And it was so evident to me from very early on your commitment to your community. And I cannot wait to partner with you. So thank you so much.
Awesome.
Wonderful. From one Michelle to the next. And then if Amber is ready, we can go ahead and have her come on. Yay. Hi, Amber.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here and so glad to endorse this amazing campaign, this amazing duo. I do apologize that my camera's not on. I am still working. I work with youth who have, been in a situation that now they need help with finding housing. And one of the things that really stuck out to me about you all's campaign was the fact that you wanted to push for eviction diversion programs. And that's something that's really important to me, because seeing in Wacomico County, seeing the rate of evictions that was going on, even when there was a memorandum, you know, we see that there were so many evictions that there were new families and new young people experiencing homelessness. And it's just a point where I identify with so much of the policy that you guys are looking forward to. Exactly, like, working with the legislator and local communities to pass equitable zoning laws. Like, that's really important, especially when we're talking about, home ownership and, the ability for, the Black community to have this wealth. And so there's many things that I love about this campaign, but one of the things that really stuck out is the fact that how personable both of you are, and especially John, because as anyone can know, I'm a hard person to sell. I don't do politics. And so it really takes a personal conversation. And I had a really great conversation with John and got to know him, and he got to know me. And I feel as though I can't wait to meet you, Michelle, in the coming weeks. And I'm excited to endorse this campaign, and I'm excited to, support the future, and you guys are it. And so thank you.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. It is so important, both, on the Eastern Shore and in our cities, just across the state. It's so important. And I really look forward to having that conversation and getting to know you as well. So thank you for your support.
Okay. So that is the endorsement portion. Let's see, we do have a Q&A portion that we need to do just real fast. I know that we're closing in on 7:30. If everybody would, want to be respectful of everyone's time. Let's see, I believe that Marie, here's a couple of questions. I'll read them if that's okay. Let's see, Marie Valong would like to know if the ERA will protect women having an abortion.
That is an excellent question. And I know we don't have a lot of time. There's a strong movement to try and get the ERA actually in the Constitution. It has been ratified, but there's all these weird complications. We are lucky that Senator Ben Cardin and Senator Chris Van Hollen have been huge advocates for it. It is a question that we have not been willing to hang our hats on because it's just not there yet. And so, it could be one more feather in our cap if we get it. But not enough. I'm not going to commit to it yet. But we want it passed. We want it on the books.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I think we have one last question. The Eastern Shore has a lot of development happening in the small towns, and we have outdated water, wastewater, and stormwater systems. These towns don't have the money to improve them. In the 80s, the MDE had grants that helped and low interest loans. Will you be able to do anything about this?
Yeah, I know I've got about 30 seconds, so I'm just going to say yes, absolutely. That is on our radar. We want to make sure that we are providing economic resources to folks that need it, because that is so important. It is part of the infrastructure that we need to have in order to have a healthy environment. So it is on our radar, absolutely. And we'll talk about that more when we are there at the end of this month.
Yes, I know. We have so many things to talk about. Well, listen, thank you so much. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for joining us tonight, taking some time. And yes, we will be seeing you Memorial Day weekend. Can't believe it's right around the corner, right?
Yes, Wendy, Demetria, Jared, Tyler, everybody that was involved in this, thank you all so much. It is truly an honor to both me and John to have received your endorsement, and we look forward to working together to build that better, more prosperous Maryland, because it's really together that we're going to get there.
Absolutely. We are very excited and pumped up. I hope everyone else is too. Okay. Just the last few things for those of us who are still watching. We're going to put some links to volunteer and to donate. We are always looking for volunteers. Please reach out to us in any way if you're interested. We have a volunteer form that we'll put in the chat or all across the bottom for donations. I think you probably are familiar with the Lower Shore Progressive Caucus. You can donate via Act Blue, and you can visit our website as well. So just want to thank everybody for coming here tonight and joining us. And if you have any questions, just let us know. Oh, and Marie Valon won the let's see, hold on one second, won the giveaway. So Marie, if you would just be kind enough to send us a direct message, and we can coordinate with you on that. I think that's it. Everybody have a good night.